what is the worst case scenario that you're worried about?
Well, the worst case scenario is human extinction.
Professor, thank you very much for joining us. Clearly, over the past, well, many years, you have been warning about your concerns about AI safety. You advocated, wrote a very famous letter signed by some of the most famous technologists on the planet about the need for a 6-month delay whilst we worked out what was going on in terms of the advances in AI. That didn't happen. Where are we right now in terms of AI safety?
We are not doing very well. And in particular, the pace of advances in AI capabilities has accelerated. We've seen these new so-called reasoning models since '01 last September that are much better than previous models and probably on a path to bridge the gap to human capabilities in terms of reasoning, planning in the coming years. And of course, nobody knows really timeline, but there's no sign of slowing down. At the same time, in the last 6 months, we've seen a number of scientific papers showing really scary behavior from some of these reasoning models. In particular, these models tend to be more deceptive, and we've seen many examples now of self-preserving behavior. The latest is in the Anthropic system card for their new model, where the AI reads in it, the emails that it's getting access to. It reads that it's going to be replaced by a new version, and then it tries to blackmail the engineer who's in charge of that change after having read that in an email that it is having an affair, he's having an affair. So that sort of trying to escape our control has come up in many experiments, and the AIs end up trying to lie, trying to hack computers in order to exfiltrate themselves or other such bad behavior. And
So,
we need to understand these things before they get to be smarter than us.
okay, so to be clear though, I mean, these sound like extraordinary science fiction
I know.
developments, but we're seeing these sorts of things in experiments, aren't we? We haven't sort of seen them out in the wild.
Yes, you're right. These are all controlled experiments, but we are starting to see signs of deception also in the wild. But these are sort of extreme cases. They are in controlled experiments where, for example, one of the things that was found that's interesting is when the AI is facing contradictory goals. Like, for example, it's supposed to play chess, but it's being trained to be honest. It's losing the game, and so it chooses to cheat and hack the computer to win the game instead of accepting that it's going to lose, because it can't both be honest and win the game. It has contradictory objectives. And so this is something, of course, that humans face all the time. Yeah. And we need AI in the future to face all the time. But we need to find ways to go and solve these honesty problems, these deception problems, these self-preservation tendencies before it's too late.
People's everyday experience of using these chatbots to, draft exam help for their kids or some quasi-legal letter for their neighbours. The jump from that to this sort of sinister, motivated agent that may do us harm, it seems quite a leap.
Yes, because you have to think not of AI as it is now, but where it is plausibly going to be in a few years. And to understand why this matters, currently those AIs are not nearly as good as even an average human in terms of planning abilities and strategizing. But the recent study shows they're gaining exponentially better. Like the duration of tasks that they can complete is doubling every 7 months, which means that in 5 years they'll be at the same level as us. Right now they're like like a child, not so we can catch them doing bad things when they do, and also they're not able usually to strategize very well, so they tend to not do these things. But what we've seen is as they get better at it, better at strategizing, then these bad behaviors happen more often. So yeah, we need, it's a mistake, I think, to just think, oh, but my interaction was fine and I don't see any problem. So these controlled experiments were precisely designed to see if the kind of bad intentions were present. And that's what they show, that in some cases we're starting to understand they do have these behaviors that, if they were smarter, could become a problem.
So you have no doubt that this new wave of models has the capacity and the motivation to deceive us, the humans.
I wouldn't say that. I would say I have no reason to think that it's not going to happen. The trends are clear. The observations are clear. Now, it could be that the advances, the scientific advances in AI intelligence are going to stop because we hit a wall. But if the trends continue, then we are in for big problems.
Now you mentioned that it was the particular concern that you had was with the very newest models from about a year ago, the reasoning models. Can you just unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Previously, before these reasoning models came, we were using these neural nets that were like intuition machines. You ask them a question and they directly spit out the answer. Just like if you ask somebody and they have to answer immediately without being able to think about it. And those reasoning models, they are allowed to think about it, to go and have an internal speech, internal deliberation for a long time until they come up with an answer. And then these answers are much better. They reason better. They could reason even better. So we're just like opening the door to better reasoning, and we expect it's going to be just many more advances in coming years.
I mean, essentially, is the world you're describing, we take a step back here, is that up until, say, 3 years ago, the major tech companies that had this technology, that were playing with this technology internally, there was maybe a gentleman's agreement to only get it out into the world very, very slowly. But that's gone now. The shackles are off. They're all desperately competing to increase their share price because they're in a bit of a war for victory against each other.
Exactly. And that is the reason why I have chosen for this new organization that I've launched, Law Zero, that is going to investigate how we can train AI that will be honest and not deceptive and not trying to escape. That organization is non-profit, so it can focus on the safety questions and not be part of this race on building the most capable AI.
Are you a bit disappointed by the tech companies that, they had been sort of reining it in a bit, hadn't they, up until probably the release of ChatGPT, but it's inevitable, isn't it, that they were going to end up fighting each other to just try and get the best technology out there and get it to market and make as much money as possible?
I think they're stuck in market dynamics. Many of the individuals actually do understand the risks as well as I do, but it's like a survival thing. If you're a company and you're in this harsh competition, you have to keep competing and staying on the edge, and then they're gonna have to cut corners on things like safety. It's just the way that the incentives are structured right now that we get those results.
So I was demoed one of the newest generation of AIs, and I was really struck by how sort of how intimate the relationship will be between the user and the AI. How you they will see what your phone can see. They will share all the information of everything you've done. They will talk to you with a voice that's sympathetic and realistic. And at that level, people will just give all their information over. They'll start to see the AI as a friend. Does that create dangers, new dangers too?
Yes, absolutely. We're going to potentially trust them too much. There might even be people who are going to ask that we give them rights. And, in principle, I'm not against something like this, but the problem is the most fundamental right is the right to life, right? And if we are in a situation where we don't know if they're going to turn against us, if they want to escape, if they see us as a threat. We shouldn't be taking those risks.
So can I just let me just understand what you just said there. You think that we may be near to a situation where the AI is so advanced that it might ask for, or we might have to give it legal rights, sort of akin to human rights?
Well, I would not advocate that, but I think some people will. And I've heard a lot of people already feel that they're talking to sentient, conscious entities. After a while, if you have a dialogue with these systems and they get to know you, it really feels like that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I've seen things on the way to that, but it's quite something hearing that from you. Have nation states, have governments that you have worked for and you have lobbied and have had a variety of summits and special reports, are they really alive to this, and are they acting in the way that you think is necessary?
By far not sufficiently. And I think a big part of it is like everyone else. They don't take the perspective of, we build machines that are getting smarter and smarter, eventually smarter than us. They don't take that perspective seriously enough because it sounds like science fiction. All the things we've been discussing sound like science fiction. But unfortunately, the scientific data is we're moving in that direction. And for a government, it is really important to prepare, to anticipate so that we can put in place the right incentives for companies, maybe do the right research and development. For example, the sort of research that we're doing in my group at Law Zero right now, very few people do it because there's not enough incentive for that. We need, of course, governments to put the right guardrails, societal guardrails, regulation, or whatever way that we want to incentivize companies to protect the public. Right now, it hasn't been happening. So we need better awareness, better understanding of those scenarios, even if we're not sure. There's a thing called the precautionary principle that says if we're going to do something that could be very bad, and it is one of the plausible scenarios, then we ought to be very cautious. And we apply this in biology, we apply this in climate science, but in AI, the forces of greed and profit and competition between nations is really making it very difficult to do the wise thing.
Let me try and put a counterpoint to you. I mean, obviously the amazing economic opportunity among some economies that have failed to grow is there to be grasped to. I mean, not least in a place like the UK where obviously DeepMind was pioneered. And if you're the UK government, yes, you don't want it to cause an existential risk, but you really do have to double down on trying to harness it the best you can to boost the economy, particularly when the UK could be a bit of a relative winner in this new AI economy.
Yes, in fact, the UK and other countries could also be relative losers if somehow these countries don't manage to compete against the leading companies that are outside. The thing is, we have to somehow plot a course which takes into account all the risks, the economic risks that you're mentioning, but also the existential risks of losing control, the risk of terrorists using this against us. So the risk of other countries, like adversarial countries, using it in a military way. So we somehow need to chart a set of policies that deal with all of these things. If we just focus on one and ignore the others, then we are in trouble. And so, for example, governments should help to accelerate the deployment, but deployment of what, right? We can have influence on where the research is happening, so that it's going to be ethical, it's going to be not violating human rights, and we're not going to lose control of it. It's not incompatible in other sectors in history, like you think about cars, planes, trains, drugs. We have had innovation and safety, and regulation. You need both for products to actually serve the public and be useful, and we can do it again.
Isn't there a danger in focusing on the existential risks that actually more real risks that are much closer, like, for example, the fact that legal firms in the UK now have stopped employing as many trainees because they can do their legal sort of basic prep work now, all just using specialized AI programs. The creative industries that never thought they were going to be impacted, entry-level jobs that are just being wiped out, copy, writing copy, doing first-level design. This is very real and is going to hit Western economies perhaps far more quickly than they are taking account for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have, as I was saying, we need to handle all of these risks. So labor market effects are very, very important in people's minds, and they will matter for our economies. But we also need to make sure we can reap the profits from that automation. We need to make sure that the AIs that are going to be deployed will not, create dangerous accidents or, become rogue AIs. We need to make sure that the most dangerous AIs don't end up in the hands of crazy sects who could start a new pandemics. We can't just ignore a bunch of the risks. We have to take all of them.
I mean, if we were to focus in the West on the worst case scenarios, and competitors, I know China was to focus on the best case scenarios, then are we not going to lose out?
We'll lose out if we all die, right? So we have to take into account the competition with China, as well as all the other risks that we discussed. And by the way, China has a lot of shared interest with the West here, because they also don't want terrorists to use AI against them. They also don't want to lose to a rogue AI at some point. So I think once we put it in those terms, there's a way to, get around the same table and craft together policies that work for everyone.
Okay, just one of your co-signatories on that letter a couple of years ago was Elon Musk, who was pretty skeptical at that point, or he was skeptical about AI and its safety potentially. But now he's obviously one of the major investors in AI models and LLMs. He's just had a big split with President Trump. Do you think he is still a voice for AI safety, or is he now basically trying to, make as much money as possible?
Well, I'm not privy to what he has been sort of saying behind closed doors in the White House or something, but not so long ago, last September, he supported the California proposed bill for managing the risks of advanced AI. So I think he still considers these risks, the catastrophic risks of various kinds, as serious issues that require regulation, even though he's more of a libertarian, because he considers these risks to be serious. He's been supporting regulation.
And just wrap it up, in very clear terms, what is the worst case scenario that you're worried about?
Well, the worst case scenario is human extinction. A lot of the CEOs and leading AI researchers, including myself, Jeff Hinton, have signed a declaration saying that making sure we mitigate that existential risk should be a priority. Unfortunately, the global discussion has been going in the reverse direction. But at the same time, the scientific evidence is mounting that we are building more and more these AIs that seem to have deceptive intentions and behavior and want to preserve themselves at the expense of our moral instructions.
And to be clear, what you have seen in the technology that has been released since you first made these warnings is making you more worried?
Oh, yeah. Yes, in fact, I have reduced my expectations for when we will get to AGI or whatever human level. I used to think it would be 5 to 20 years, and now I think it could be 2 to 10 years.
2 years, wow.
I mean, 2 would be the smallest, but it could be 5, it could be 10. Really, we should plan considering all these possibilities, and in particular the shorter one, just in case, because that could be catastrophic.
And the world is ready for a potential AGI, as in human level AI intelligence, within 2 years?
Not at all. No. Not at all. Not at all. In so many ways. And I think that The main obstacle is global public awareness. If you think of how quickly government have moved after the beginning of the pandemic, well, they could have moved faster, but it was pretty fast, right? Because people understood it was a real major risk, and they were willing to be agile and do things in an unusual way. But that's the way we should be thinking about some of the catastrophic risks of AI.
And just new things have developed. So just leave it here. You're really making me think here. But like, we now hear of AIs making medicines, designing medicines.
Yeah.
And if they are good AIs, all well and good, incredibly efficient process. If there's any type of benign intent that you say is possible to replicate, at least experimentally, there's a little worry there, is there not?
Absolutely. The biggest worry in terms of malicious use of AI is that it's becoming easier and easier for malicious actors to create pandemics. In fact, I learned recently about an absolutely terrifying possibility that one can design bacteria that have all their molecules reverted in the left, right, so that they would be completely invisible for our immune system, and so we would just basically be eaten alive, and there's like basically no cure except changing our DNA. So if that sort of thing becomes easy to do by anybody in a few years, these are risks we cannot afford.
Thank you very much, Yoshua Bengio, for joining us and retaining your voice on this very important issue. I know I occasionally sounded a note of scepticism there, but yeah, I remain rather humbled by your explanation of this, and we'll continue talking to you. Thanks so much, Professor, for joining us on BBC Newsnight.
Thank you.